Hello, I am Too Tight Lautrec, and we interrupt your regularly scheduled Sonnet show to bring you another installment from my worldwide reading tour, where I reach across the airwaves and bring you another selection from Great Escapes from Detroit by Joseph O'Malley. It's just like being at a regular reading, except you're able to sit at home with your tea and your crumpets and your feet up on a little stool. So sit back and relax, and I'll read a selection from the second story in the collection, and the second story is called Exiles. Grace Quinn sat in the dark kitchen imagining all sorts of horrors. She listened for the water's whistle so she could wet the tea and calm herself as she waited for the sound of Dennis's car pulling over the gravel in the driveway. He'd always been a good boy, and she hoped he still was. Grace, a small, shapely woman with curves that fell just short of fat, had curly, silver-threaded black hair that she most often wore in an upsweep because of its tendency to sprout like stiff wires at all angles if left untamed. Tonight she left it down and let the curls fall where they may. Her Tom thought her a fool to be waiting up for their grown son. She hadn't done so for Colm, the oldest, or Miles, or Iggy, who was a slice of the devil himself, or either of the girls, Eileen and Nora. So why was Dennis different, he wanted to know. But he knew. Dennis was the youngest, and had sprung almost from out of nowhere. Just after Nora was born, Grace had thought the change was coming on her early, but it turned out to be Dennis. She and Tom had just opened the cafe and bookstore near Wayne State called the Be Loud Glade, and yet one more baby wasn't what they were after. The surprise of it nearly knocked her over, and then she'd almost lost him at that. His was a most painful birth, not because he was big. He was just a little bluebird-sized thing, but because he lingered, pounding the insides out of her, refusing to come out until, in the 25th hour, they finally yanked him out with barely a pulse left for either of them. Although delicate, he'd grown into her most beautiful child, with wild black hair and eyes to match, and smooth pale skin that pearled with high emotion. It was a curious thing watching your child grow, and then grow up. Watching puberty hit was hard on everyone involved, to be sure. For Grace, it was like watching the sweet child die. It was the first turning away from the mother, and it killed her, too, for a little while. She wouldn't want them to be dependent on her for life, but then again, well, yes, she would if she were honest with herself. The O'Brien's dog howled, and the gravel rumbled and crunched in the driveway. Grace held her hands around the cup to warm them, and made her face placid. The door jiggled, swished open, and closed. The landing was right off the kitchen, so Dennis saw her straight away. "Ma, how are you?" Grace smiled. "Couldn't sleep." "Not waiting up for me, I hope." He kissed her forehead. He smelled of alcohol and cigarettes. They kept their voices low so as not to wake the house. "It's getting on 2:30, she said, "and you'll have to be getting up in only a couple of hours for work." He nodded at her cup. "Tea's not likely to help you sleep, caffeine and all." "It's peppermint. Settles the stomach." "Did you have fun?" "Just out dancing with the Ukrainians." "They seem a bit of a wild bunch. Do they work weekends?" "Not really. I guess their parents pay for most things, but they're all smart and they know where to have fun. Be careful you don't get used to what you can't keep up." "Okay, Mother," he said, smirking. "Get yourself some sleep." He smoothed the soft coils at her temples and watched them spring back, and as he turned to go up to bed, she couldn't resist a parting shot. "Dennis," he turned. "I'm glad you're not a mangled, bloody mess sprawled desolate at the side of the road somewhere, as I've been sitting here worrying you were. Glad you're home safe." He walked back, knelt beside her, rested his head in the hollow of her shoulder, and squeezed her in a tight hug. They both laughed and kissed, and off he went to bed. When she creaked into bed next to Tom, he said, "All's well, Mother?" She prodded her cold foot between his warm calves and laughed. "All's well, father." All her other children had had broken bones, semi-serious accidents, and illnesses that could have gone either way. All had recovered, and seemed stronger as a result. Dennis had never had any of that. He was quick and watchful and often silent. He managed to avoid the growing pains the other kids barreled through, and because of this Grace feared for him, as if he were delicate crystal on a shaky shelf, or a rare jewel left unguarded. When he started talking about the Ukrainian girl, Grace felt the tremor underfoot. She saw the thief lurking in the shadows. Her name was Marta. From what Dennis had let drop, she was accomplished enough to become a classical pianist, but she planned to go to medical school. Dennis wanted to be a teacher. He'd first mentioned her as one of a group, but by the time he'd mentioned her by name for the third time, Grace knew that there was nothing for it except to have her over for dinner. And I'll leave it right there for you. If you'd like to read the rest of this story, oh, look at her, ready to tell you how to buy the book by going to the links below. Well, in fact, you can go to the link below to send a little message to my publisher to request that it be put onto Kindle. I've spoken with them, and they believe that they won't be able to do that until the summer, but for the moment, I'd prefer that nobody buys it on Amazon for delivery, simply for the health and safety of the Amazon workers and all the mail deliverers and all the people with whom they live and come in contact with, and the rest of the world in general, because things spread, and I'd rather you just spread the love for the moment. Until we meet again, I'll be back in about a month. I'm like Cher, I just never go away. Until we meet again, remember, the world is full of wonder. All you have to do is pay attention. I'm Tyler Trek. Mwah.